Good morning, and thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us today as we investigate the talk, listen, and connect through educating ourselves about the high stresses and challenges teenagers face. This event is hosted by the Guidance Center through the Prevention Program. My name is Anita Rothert, and I will be your facilitator today. We have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to share with you. And if you have any questions, they will be answered at the end of the presentation. Thank you and welcome. Our presentation today is Talk, Listen, Connect. Overview of our workshops, Brain Matters and Warning Signs by Anthony Harrison and Lily Rose. Communication is Crucial by Brooke Grosky and Anita Rothert. What Parents Need to Know About Computer and Phone Technology by Allison Smith, and Normalizing Self-Care by Samantha Mall. Well, a few housekeeping items. These presentations will be recorded and available on the website, www.suds.info. Please enter any of your questions in the Q&A box as we will address them at the end of the day. Please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen and reply to any of the panelists and the attendees. Certificates of attendance will be provided to those who have attended all sessions upon request, and thank you in advance for joining us today. We do have a few poll questions to get us started. Number one, at what age do you think the brain is fully developed? We'll discuss that more. At what age do you feel your children should be talking and having conversations with you about drugs and alcohol? Earlier, the better. How many times a week do you share a meal with your family? This is really crucial. It connects with you, it builds relationships with you. And today, research is telling us that 30% of families in the United States have one meal with their family. We need to work on that. Also, how often do you check your children's phones and computer activity? Very interesting question. We'll find out more about the answer. And what are some ways to take care of yourself so you can take care of others? Great question. Do you walk? Do you listen to music? Do you engage in yoga or meditation? These are all really crucial because if we can't take care of ourselves, how can we take care of our children? Now I'm going to turn it over to Anthony and Brooke and Lily.
Adolescence right now. I have a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old now, so I'm in the thick of this. And being in the mental health field and studying human behavior, I still to this day get curveballs thrown with my children, because parenting, as I said, is an ongoing process that you continually learn from. So kids are obviously bombarded with pressures from peers and various forms of media every single day. If you look at social media, they're continuously comparing themselves to others, maybe in their peer groups, and they're also getting pressures from peers to behave in certain manners. So constantly being bombarded with these pressures. every single day, 8,000 adolescents try an illicit drug for the first time. And an illicit drug is classified as one that is illegal. So I talk a lot to middle schoolers and high schoolers about the why, the reasons behind 8,000 adolescents trying an illicit drug for the first time. Oftentimes it comes down to a number of different things, but one of the major things that I've noticed is they're using substances as a means to escape an unwanted circumstance or situation in their life that they don't want to deal with. Oftentimes that is the catalyst to adolescents making that decision to try a substance. Some others are curiosity, peer pressure, etc. Substance use expectations develop during early childhood, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. Let's say you go to work and you have a really stressful day, and you come home and you're just frustrated because you had a very terrible day, and you have a little child at home, and let's say you come in and they could see that you're just really worked up and you're frustrated and you have a short fuse. Let's say to decompress, you want to have a glass of wine or beer. What the child witnesses is you sitting down, you having that glass of an alcoholic beverage, and they notice that the frustration and the stress starts to melt away. So they think in turn that, oh, what they're drinking is something that makes them happier. So they have that idea that the alcohol is associated with, stress relief and calming. So when you think about that, it stands to reason that, we model for our children. And if they see that, they put that into their brains, and that's their expectations for substances. They think that it's going to calm them down and relax them. However, substance use behaviors don't typically develop until adolescence. So when they step into adolescence and you add the peer pressures and the trying to fit in and the increased number of situations that are stressful that they have to deal with, that's when they start to develop those substance use behaviors. In my field, we talk a lot about risk factors versus protective factors. So I've worked with so many students who have a slew of risk factors on the left-hand column. The chaotic home environment, ineffective parenting, academic failure, poor social coping skills, and the list goes on. Those are risk factors that tend to propel people towards substances, because what I've noticed is substances ends up being that Band-Aid approach. It's that quick fix. Instead of developing healthy calming techniques and coping strategies, most people want to just try to get that quick fix to try to escape from their problems, unfortunately. Our field tries to really ramp up protective factors, because I have found that just one of those protective factors listed on the right side has the power to outweigh so many of the risk factors. Some of the most rewarding work I've done is being able to provide some of those protective factors for adolescents. Just being there to support them during that tough time of development is so important. So how can we combat the strong force of peer pressure? I love this movie. It plays constantly around Christmas time, but this is peer pressure in a nutshell. The individual knew that it was probably not a good idea, and they were arguing and arguing and arguing, and he ended up doing it. And as a result, he got his tongue stuck to that pole, and everybody was super surprised that it happened. So to combat it, you have to know who your child is with. Who are they hanging out with? Who are their friends? What do those friends deem as important to them? Are they involved in sports? Are they involved in, extracurricular activities? What is that child all about? You should know your child's friends and what they are doing. And you should also know where your child will be. Ask them where they'll be so that you will be aware, not just letting them go and do what they want and not having any idea where they might be. Know who your teen's friends are. It's important to communicate with their parents. You get a read on other parents, you see what their parenting style is, you see what's important to them. You should have a relationship with the parents, because after all, your child's gonna be with their son or daughter, and you're gonna have to know what they're all about as well. So there are some warning signs to be aware of. As I said, adolescence is a very confusing time for youth, and there are many things that can arise during that crucial stage in development. So how can we be aware of some warning signs that typically could go under the radar? If there's declining schoolwork and grades, not saying that that's a definitive reason for mental health issues or substance abuse, but it could be an indicator that if your child has been a straight A student for the past 4 or 5 years and all of a sudden they start dipping in grades and they go to C's and D's, might be something you want to explore a little bit. Abrupt changes in friends, peer groups, and behavior. If they hung out with a bunch of athletes and they found baseball to be very important, and all of a sudden they quit, they don't want to play baseball anymore, they don't hang out with those friends, they've completely shifted peer groups and their behavior, definitely a red flag you need to be aware of, and you got to have those conversations. Optimally, I know we'll talk about communication a little later today, but open lines of communication is so crucial, especially during adolescence. You should want your child to get the information from you instead of relying on peers who've heard it secondhand, and it might be misinformation as well. Changes in sleep habits and abnormal health issues. One of the things I've noticed from parents is that the changes in sleep habits oftentimes goes unnoticed, but it's one of the things that is one of the biggest indicators of substance abuse. A lot of parents think that their child might just be struggling with insomnia and, they can't sleep. Could that be the case? Perhaps, but oftentimes changes in sleep habits can be indicative of substance use behaviors. Deteriorating relationships with family. Now, I'm not talking about the typical wanting to have some space from the parental unit because they're trying to develop their own identity. I'm talking about just ruining relationships with family, separating from everybody. It's clear when substance abuse is going on, there's going to be a lot of deterioration of relationships. And then they're going to be less open and honest. If your child is always talking about, what happened in the day or what they're worried about, and then all of a sudden they don't want to talk to you anymore, they don't want to talk about anything pertaining to their lives, that could be a sign as well. So ways to address these warning signs. So if you notice some of them, the important part is to not panic, but act right away. Be diligent with it. Have conversations. Look for evidence, make lists, keep track. You have to know what's going on. If you're suspecting that your child is experimenting with substances, you have to be diligent in ensuring that you know what's going on, why it's going on, in order to address it in the most effective way. Communicate with your child and express your concern. I've always say to people that I work with that nobody's a mind reader. If you're having emotions and you're feeling a certain type of way and you don't express those things, your child's not a mind reader. You have to sit them down and clearly articulate that you're concerned and that you're there to help and support them. Set limits. Children work best in a structured environment. They like structure, they like predictability, and setting rules and consequences isn't a bad thing. Having clear expectations for your child is very important. And then seek outside or professional help. You don't have to face this alone. You don't have to have all the answers. I said at the beginning that I've been in the mental health field for quite a while now, and I have children of my own, but I don't have all the answers either, because parenting is one of those things that just completely continues to evolve over time. Another thing I've noticed a lot of us do is focus too much on things that are outside of your control. It's important to remember that you cannot control other people's actions, words, or behavior, no matter how hard you try, because people are in control of those things and you are completely not able to change any type of thoughts they might have or behaviors they're exhibiting. But it's important that we focus on the things that we can control. You can control your words, your actions, your ideas. We all get stressed out from time to time. We all struggle. We all get those days that it feels like all the odds are against us and we have to jump over all these hurdles. And at the end of the day, we have no energy left to be parents, right? We've been there, but we have to be better about recognizing the fact that our words can hurt, our actions can hurt, our mistakes We make them all the time, but mistakes aren't the enemy. It's the fact that you have to look at each mistake and learn from them. If you learn from them, then you're doing well because you can ensure that you're not going to continuously repeat the same mistakes. And with that, I will turn it over to my wonderful co-presenter, Crystal Rose.
Thank you, Anthony. So today I'm going to be talking about stress, or I'll start with stress. I love this picture because stress is like the main focal point for a lot of decisions, behaviors, and emotions within people, and especially youth. But how to handle that stress when it occurs is one of the most important things to think about, as well as what to do afterwards. So to start, I tell a little story. So there's this gazelle. Imagine a gazelle in the wild, just grazing the grass, eating the grass, minding its own business. It's just, having lunch. And then from the side, there's a lion trying to pounce on it. So the gazelle gets off, catches the lion out of the corner of its eye, immediately starts feeling its heart pound again, just tries to run away from it. Lion runs right after it. Lion gets so close to the gazelle after every twist and turn, but just shy of the gazelle gets away. And it does the craziest thing right after the gazelle gets away. The gazelle proceeds to graze grass again. So what does this have to do with anything? For youth, again, people in general, but especially for youth, facing a stressful situation can be nerve-wracking, but it's also the constant thinking or playing over your mind that's also negatively affecting well-being. So back to the gazelle story. The gazelle does not think about the lion, coming back. The gazelle does not think, oh my gosh, I should have took this turn. I should have took that turn. It does not think like, oh my gosh, I almost just died. It just proceeds to graze grass. And I know I'm not assuming everyone does it, but especially for me, when I go through something, I constantly think about it afterwards, even though I just had been through it. So it's important to take away that just because a stressful situation has passed from somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that a person is no longer stressed by it. So I'm going to continue on. So most common stressors. There are divorce. There is relocating, moving away, losing a pet, breaking up with a significant other, poor school performance, death of a relative, and then transitioning from middle to high school. And I know too, transitioning from elementary school to middle school can also be a common stressor as well. So, but it's important to emphasize that, no matter how big or small, anything can cause stress. So the effects of stress: body, mind, emotions, behavior. So with the body, it can cause headaches, frequent infections. The mind, indecision, hasty decisions, impaired judgment. With emotions, apprehension, indifference, insomnia, and behavior, substance abuse. I know Anthony talked to that degree before. Loneliness, restlessness. So it's more than just feeling nervous or worried about something. It can affect many components for a person. Okay, so here, high school students coping with stress. So 61% of teens say stress and anxiety have a large impact on their lives. And while 11% say they feel compelled at times to drink alcohol or use drugs or help cope with stress. And so I know a lot of teens or just, kids want to try to find quick fixes for what they're stressed about. And just in order to cope. But one of these ways is substance use, but it's only temporary and it can have consequences to health. So it's not really a positive coping mechanism, but all right, what is mental illness? Okay, so medical condition that is marked primarily by sufficient disorganization of personality, mind, or emotions to impair normal psychological functioning and cause marked distress or disability that are typically associated with disruption in normal thinking, feeling, mood, behavior, interpersonal interactions, or daily functioning. And so I love this part. So mental illnesses are brain disorders, not defects in personality or a sign of poor moral character. And before I even got schooling for all this, I didn't even think about this part, that a person can't necessarily help this. So I'll give an example. My sister, she has bipolar disorder. Growing up, she's always been up. She's always been down. Like it's constantly ranged. She can never keep a job. I mean, but I always thought, well, she's too lazy to keep a job. And really the workplace would never really work with her. They just thought, from all her moods, she was not well to work with, or she found the work environment stressful, demanding, and she couldn't keep up. And I always thought too that whenever she'd make like a million posts on social media about like how she feels alone or no one's there for her, or she's like the black sheep of the family, when really, I thought, she just wanted attention when I was growing up, but really, she really felt alone. Like no one understood her because no one took that time. And that's why I was like, she really just felt like she was trapped within her own mind. And that's why I like this picture too, because it's not necessarily something they can help. And then many degrees of recovery are possible with medication, therapy, good coping skills, and a strong support system. And I love, strong support system. It's a key factor, it's a protective factor. So even if someone pushes you away, it's important to, always stay there, because they need to know that they can count on you. All right, so what causes mental illness? Imbalance of brain chemicals. Genetics play a role. Some people inherit. Trauma, life events, or other serious problems as well. Anxiety disorders. All right, so more prevalent than all other disorders in child/adolescence, vary in severity. Anxiety disorders interfere with person's studies, activities, family life, social relationships, and to the picture to the right, sorry, Tony. I like this example because it just kind of lays out what, when you're talking to somebody, what could be hurtful phrases, what could be helpful phrases. So the hurtful ones, it's not worth worrying about that. Why stress about it? Everyone has anxiety. You just have to deal. And with those first two, it really doesn't give value to the person's feelings. Like they get, they just shrug it off. And the last two, have you tried yoga or meditation? Anxiety disorder, you just sound stressed to me. These two are hurtful because it's offering unwanted opinions. Sometimes someone just wants you to listen. That's all they want. Sometimes they're like, what should I do? But most of the time they just want, listening ear, someone that they know that they can depend on. Some helpful phrases is that anything I can do to help. My gosh, that sounds so tough. I'm proud of you for hanging in there. I'm here to listen. Let me know what you need. I'm glad you're getting the support you deserve. All right, signs and symptoms: excessive worry, indecisiveness, irritability, nervousness, avoidance of situations, and sleep disturbance. And at school, youth may be extremely well-behaved and quiet, fearful of asking questions, demand extra time for teachers, asking questions, and constantly needed a great deal of reassurance, and not handing assignments on time because the work is seen as less than perfect. Complain of sudden unexplained physical illness or stomach ache when exam or presentation have been scheduled. And for me personally, I've never, I don't have an anxiety disorder. I never really had anxiety like super severe, but I have dealt with it growing up, especially with the first one, being extremely well behaved and quiet. I was always afraid to ask questions, because I always just felt like it was stupid or I was just going to be laughed at. And I also too with school, I would never try out for sports, and a lot of it had to do with home stuff, but majority of it was because I was too anxious to even try out, because again, for the same reasons. I don't want to look stupid. I don't want to get laughed at. And as I got older, I really dealt with that anxiety and trying to pinpoint that. And I realized it was just, it was just my thinking. But at that time, it really felt like reality to me. So, and I got to think too, that's what a lot of people feel like. And so right now for trauma, I'm going to turn it right back over to Anthony, who's going to discuss some of this. So right back to you.
Thank you very much, Bristol. We have to talk about trauma because unfortunately trauma is very prevalent. One person may receive an event as deeply traumatic, but another may not. A reason for that is the accessibility of supportive people or resources. It all depends. So trauma is a subjective thing. And as parents, I think it's important to notice that we might have our own trauma. We might have endured things when we were growing up that we then carry with us into adulthood and into parenting. So we must be diligent about, addressing our own pasts and healing in our own way before we can be as supportive as possible to our own youth and our own children that we love. So trauma is one of those things that it could be any number of events that people see as traumatic, and it can have a profound impact on, the trajectory of one's life. Particular types of trauma affect some individuals more than others. An example I see all the time working with adolescents is divorce. There are some students who are completely fine and seem unbothered by it, and there are others who are just completely derailed by going through a divorce. And once again, there's so many different factors that help to explain the differences of reactions based on a traumatic event. History of trauma may make more people susceptible to later traumatic events, but resilience is always possible. Healing is always possible. We put an emphasis on resilience, which is essentially bouncing back from life's challenges, overcoming hurdles and obstacles, finding what works for you. So there's always hope. Youth can obviously respond differently than adults, and it depends on a number of different things. One of the most important things being where they're at in development and their psychological maturity. It obviously can be a single event. So one of those things, like an example would be a car accident. It's a single event, could be very traumatic. People develop post-traumatic stress disorder from those things. There are individuals who might be fearful to drive after it because every time they get in the car, they might hear the crunch. They might relive that, accident that they had. Or it could be a series of events like ongoing trauma, abuse, neglect, those types of things. So there are several types of trauma. There's the abuse, which could be physical, emotional, or sexual. Neglect, which are physical and emotional as well. And then household dysfunction. This can be a number of different things. Mental illness in the home, incarcerated relatives, violence in the home, substance abuse, and divorce. All of these things, as I said earlier, it's modeled for the child. They go through it as well. It affects the whole household. So how does trauma typically surface? Well, in youth, I work a lot with providing support to school staff and training them on trauma because they're working with a myriad of different students from all different walks of life. So what school staff or we as parents might see is that anger, that frustration, that hurtful behavior, the lashing out, the irritability. That's what you see on the surface, but we don't typically put a focus or emphasis on what's going on underneath, what's fueling those behaviors that we can see. Could be trauma, abandonment, depression, anxiety, could be stress, could be hurt. You could feel inadequate. Those are the things that are fueling the behaviors that you're seeing on the surface. So the differences of trauma. There's acute, short, single events, as I had talked about, like a car accident is a good example of that. There's chronic trauma, which is the experience of multiple traumatic events over a period of time. And then there's complex trauma, which are the multiple traumatic events that are caused by trusted adults. They're complex because there's a lot of different layers to it, and it impacts the youth much more profoundly in that regard. And then there's neglect or failing to provide basic needs. That impacts children as well. So there are some things you can pay attention to, though. If your child's having problems in concentrating, they just cannot seem to focus. If they have difficulty staying awake throughout the day. If they have inappropriate outbursts for no particular reason at all. Nothing's really going on, and you notice an inappropriate outburst for that was sparked by absolutely nothing in your mind. That could be something to look forward to or look out for. And then reactions to trauma reminders. I gave the example about the car accident, and when the person gets back in the vehicle, they might be transported right back to the day that that accident happened. And that could include the fear, the anxiety, the panic. They could even hear the sounds of the crunching, or they can transport themselves back to that time and place when they experienced that event. That's oftentimes how trauma works as well. People have trauma reminders and they are literally re-experiencing the trauma. So it's a very complex issue that we have to navigate. Children, depending on their developmental stage, they might frequently talk about trauma. They might draw pictures. They might speak about it repeatedly. This happens a lot when children lose loved ones early on. They'll want to talk about it constantly. So that's another element to look out for. But how do we support our child's mental health? Well, for one, I always say we have to do better about addressing our own mental health. We have to take care of ourselves, because if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be our best for our children. We have to model things that are healthy for our children, like forgiveness. If we can model practicing self-care, which you'll hear all about in a little while, if we can model that for youth, they'll put an emphasis on ensuring that they're mentally healthy as well. Be present, have those conversations, be patient. I know it's easier said than done, especially with stress and frustration, but if you're not in a great mind state to have those conversations, work on your own calming techniques, your coping strategies that'll help you get to a place where you can have those heart-to-heart conversations and support your child. Sharing your own feelings is great because it shows your child that it's great to be able to share your feelings and your emotions have actual value. So if you model that, they're going to be more likely to come to you if they're feeling any type of way. And listen actively. As Bristol said, the most important thing that you can do is just be there and provide that platform to let your child talk about things that they are struggling with. And some of the great and most rewarding work I've ever done, I haven't really said anything. I think we so often think that we have to string together the perfect set of words in order to support somebody, but the most profound work that I've done was just giving that person that platform to just share the things that are on their minds, things that they're struggling with. And when I actively listen, I show them that they care, and I give them that platform to be able to share the things they are struggling with. And by doing so, they feel heard, they feel validated, and they're able to process those things. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Bristol to share a little bit about this resource page, and then we're going to turn it over to the next presentation.
Okay, so provide some resources for everybody here. So there's crisis emergency ones, National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, Teen Crisis Line, and just a few others. Even some depression/counseling services. Of course, the Guidance Center, gotta include us. Common Ground, Apex Behavioral Health, and then substance use services as well. And then on the next page, we have our contact info if you ever want to have any other questions after this presentation is over, or if you just want more info about other programs and things that we do, feel free to contact us. And then I'm just going to turn it over to Anita and Brooke to discuss communication is crucial. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Tony and Bristol, for that great presentation. We really appreciate the information. Today, we're going to be talking about communication is crucial. Absolutely, it's very crucial. My name is Anita Rothard again, and also my co-partner is Brooke Kresge.
Yep, I'm
pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, no, you are.
Awesome.
I'm a prevention specialist at the Guidance Center. I've been here for about 1.5 years, and I'm excited to do this conference.
Great. The agenda today is going to be recognizing our parenting styles, when to offer advice, and when to listen. What is communication? 3 stages of communication, and how to start a conversation with your teen, which is very important. The keys to listening, and then we're going to provide some resources for you. You ever thought about what is your parenting style? Did we get it from our parents, our grandparents, our coworkers when they parented? Let's talk about that a little bit. Do you know what the parenting styles are? Well, let's look at a drill sergeant. Put in your mind a sergeant in the Army or the Marines. That kind of parent demands that their child do exactly as they say at that very moment or else. That parent also is telling your child, you're incapable of making life decisions. You can't think on your own, so you need me to make all those decisions for you, and you can't do anything without my control. The helicopter. This is a kind of a parent that hovers and protects their child. The helicopter, which I was for many years, keeps their child and thinks that their children are fragile and can't make decisions on their own. You don't want your child to make a mistake, so you do things for them. That's not encouraging them to be problem solvers. And you're also telling them, you need me to intervene for you. You need me to protect you. A consultant. Think about that. A consultant is a person that is actually giving complete attention to that teenager and listening to them with all your body parts, your face, your ears, your hands, everything. That parent is there to be a block for them to bounce things off of, to let them know that they have the capability of problem solving and are able to build quality relationships and solve things on their own. And we are their block or their rock, and we can build really good relationships with those children being a consultant. How does it affect communication between yourself and your teen? Your parenting style really impacts the way you communicate with your children. It develops an adult relationship as you get older when you're able to communicate in the very beginning. They see that their role model is yourself and that you are able to listen with all your heart and only give advice when you're asked. That's really hard for parents because parents think that we know all the answers and we don't. Sometimes our children have a really good way of figuring out problems on their own. They just need someone to brainstorm with them and communicate. Yep, you're doing the right thing. Yep. But if I were you, this is what I might do. If you need some suggestions, let me know. But it also has communication builds trust, respect, and a well-balanced family structure for when they're in adulthood. I'm going to turn it over to Brooke.
Thank you. All right, so what is communication? It is something that we all do daily, whether it is a friendly or more intense conversation. It is the exchange of information between two or more people. With communication, there's always going to be someone who receives the information and someone who provides the information. We're going to talk more about that shortly. But having communication is important because it establishes a firm foundation for your children to have open dialogue when important matters occur. They feel more comfortable coming to you about something when you have provided a safe and comfortable space for them to open up. It helps build a stronger relationship with your teen, and not only when good things happen, but also when poor judgments happen. So what is a sender? A sender is the one wanting to begin the conversation. It starts the conversation. When you are a sender, it's important to choose a time that you have the least number of distractions, a time you know you won't be interrupted. Make sure you have your teen's full attention and understand what kind of mood your teen is in and ensure that they are listening to you. When speaking with your teen, speak clear and say exactly what you mean, and make sure you're speaking in a tone that is fitting to the message you're attempting to get across. Lastly, don't assume they understand what you're trying to communicate. Make sure that they are fully aware of the point you're trying to make. Being the receiver, make sure your teen knows you're listening to what they're saying. Your body language should show them you are listening to them. To show this, it might be not crossing your arms, looking your teen directly in the eyes, and other body language features. And don't forget that your teen is looking at how you're receiving the information. As a receiver, support what your teen is saying. Make sure they know you care about the information they're sharing by truly giving them your attention and focusing on the words that they're sharing with you. Don't get carried away by telling them me too. Pay attention to what they're saying. It's important to know that you understand what they are saying. Telling them I see or can let them know you are all ears. And at the end, summarize what they say. Just like being the sender, make sure you're fully aware of the information being told. So why is communication crucial? Having good communication is important because it builds trust and respect in the family. It allows the entire family to feel comfortable going to another person to discuss the things that are bothering them. Good communication skills prepare you to handle conflict when things get tough, but better yet, it helps the teens develop healthy skills that they can carry into their adult life. All right, and back to Anita.
Questions to ponder. Ask yourself, how was my communication this past week? Was it respectful or angry? Was there a lot of yelling or nice cooperation? How much time did you take to really explain your expectations to your teen? The key word is expectations. A lot of parents have no idea what that is, and they're just assuming what the expectations are. Let's talk a little bit about the 3 stages of communication. Verbal, which is spoken language, your tone of voice. Nonverbal is your body language, which is 96% of all communication is nonverbal. It includes your eye contact, your facial expression, the way you stand. If my arms are crossed and I'm smiling, I'm giving 2 different communication vibes. So visible is just the written language. Write it down. We're all of those at different times in our lives. But remember, most importantly, you are a good listener, not a good speaker. You listen to this bad and it's not a conversation.
If you're talking, they will hear you at the same time. Oh, let's go break through by seeing eye to eye. We all need something special through each other's lives. So talk back here when you can do it if you try.
Sorry, I'm gonna start. That's 80%.
Bye.
No? Okay.
Yeah. You guys really need to go, right? Pumpkin. Come on, Sam, let's go. Just a sec. Okay, if I go to Jake's for a while, we're gonna eat lunch and hang out. Yeah, sure, just still her over there. We're gonna have 5 and we'll come meet after. All right, cool. Bye. See ya.
Talking, they will hear you at the single time. That was the way to break through by seeing eye to eye.
So you like calls there today? See both the team?
What?
Yeah. Got caught drinking alcohol in the park a couple nights ago with some other kids.
Didn't tell you that?
No, I heard for it just out of the game.
How? Do you think Ken's drinking too?
I don't know. I hope not.
Yeah, we never really told him what we expect.
I know, but what do we expect? I mean, kids try at this age.
Some kids, but that doesn't mean that we should assume what we others did.
Well, first off, I just can't believe we have to have this conversation at his age.
We probably should have had it a lot sooner, and not just one talk, but every time there's a chance to discuss it. You know, just reinforce what we expect.
Yeah. We'll do that with you.
And with him. I mean, this just has the perfect opportunity. I think he talked about it. Listen.
That was the way to break through by seeing eye to eye. We all need something special through each other's lives. So talk back here when you
Hey,
can
Mom.
Hey, who's Monkey?
Mom, pick her up. I'm gonna get you so we can talk about something.
What do I do?
I'm not sure. That's why I was calling. I heard about Kyle and myself team.
Yeah.
Mom and I were surprised. We hadn't really been thinking about kids your age starting to try alcohol. Have you tried it?
No, I mean, I've been around kids that have. I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. We realized that we haven't really been clear about alcohol and what we expect. It's really important to us that we do not drink alcohol.
Okay.
There are a lot of reasons why. Most important is that we care about you. At your age, alcohol is men. You messes with your judgment. It's even looking dangerous to people just plain stupid things. And the consequences. Your teens, yeah.
Yeah, I get it.
You get it. And your girlfriends aren't gonna care if you don't drink.
No thanks. It's not my thing. I can do that.
It's not priority time. Your mom and I are here for you anytime you have questions or need help. With this or anything else.
Thanks, Ed.
Great video. Anybody have any thoughts on it? You know, one thing I thought about was he talked about expectations, what we expect. He explains what he expected from his son, and that's really good because sometimes children don't know what we expect of them. Expectations are very important to set the foundation. Let's talk about staying connected with our team. How can we stay connected with them? Always prepare topics ahead of time. Validate your feelings with empathy and compassion. 2 words: empathy, compassion. Empathy is really hard to provide. You don't realize it's one of the main ingredients of team trust. Not the dictator or the drill sergeant. Give praise that when they've done something well. Like, thank you for opening the door for that grandparent. Acknowledging those things. Controlling your emotions. Do things together. As I talked in previous, sharing regular meals together. Like I said, only 30% of families in the United States share a daily meal. That's tragic. We need to work on that a little bit. Also, be observant. What I mean by that is watch your child, watch your teen, make sure that you're listening, giving your whole attention to them, connecting with them with your eye contact, and only giving advice when the teen is asking for advice. Like Tony said, you need to be a good listener, and there is a time to listen and a time to talk. I'm going to turn it over to Brooke.
All right, thank you. All right, so listening is important because when it comes to communication, it's extremely on with your child. They won't forget what makes them feel. Listening to your child creates a safe space where they can express themselves without fear of being judged. It encourages the child to share their thoughts, feelings, and shows them that their opinion matters. If we show our children we are listening to them, it's increasing our chances that our children will listen to us. We are teaching our children by example. By making sure our children feel heard, we increase their sense of self. Their self-esteem will increase when we are listening to our child, making them feel like they matter. Listening to your child can create a sense of understanding, and it shows they care about what they are saying by being engaged and being present in the conversation. All right, here's a few resources that we put on the slide. We are going to do these to everyone at the end. And then here's a quote that I want to leave you all with. None of us will ever be perfect communicators, but we can all improve. And you have our resources slides here. Again, we're going to give a copy of these.
And do you really want to learn more, listen more, and talk less? Absolutely. Thank you for attending our Communications is Crucial presentation. And we are going to take a 15-minute break and be right back with you and talk about something that's very important. What parents need to know about app technology and computer technology. Stay with us. welcome back and thank you for coming back with us. We hope you had a few minutes to grab a cup of coffee and a little bit of a snack. And at this time, I am going to turn over to Allison Smith, who has some exciting information to share with all of you. And if you have any questions, they'll be answered at the end of the webinar. Allison, it's all up to you.
All right, good morning. My name is Allison Smith, and I'm a social worker with the Guidance Center. And I've been working in the social work field since 2004. So kind of before smartphone and smart devices were, made readily available for everyone to carry. And so I've been able to witness the change that has happened over the years and working with the kids, and have witnessed how this social media use has interrupted our households, our families, our kids. And I've also been able to see some of the great benefits that have come out of social media use. So it is something I'm going to be talking about today. So the news, right? Cell phones are a wonderful thing, okay? It's the overuse of cell phones and any negative ways that we're using them that can impact our mental health, our emotions, our friends, our family, our sleep. So today we're going to be talking about the history of cell phones. We're going to be talking about why people are addicted to smart devices and the mental health fallout of that addiction. We're going to talk about the importance of sleep. We're going to talk about ways that we should be using our phones and the analogy of candy versus vegetables. We're going to talk about physical and emotional self-care, and also setting up new rules for your household and your family if you're having issues with cell phone use, smart devices being overused, and then end with some resources. Okay, so I like the evolution of the mobile phone. Okay, so I remember back in high school, so I'm dating myself here, but about 96, 97, I saw the first student at my school carrying a cell phone, and it was in a big, huge, almost looked like a laptop bag that she had this phone in, and she would carry it around, which I don't even know why she brought it to school, but she would sometimes set it down and pick it up and pull this giant phone out that was connected to a cord, connected to the bag, and use it. So that is what, that is how cell phones first started out, as these big, huge devices that were usually connected to a pack. Again, in the early 90s, we're calling people, right? And then, the option of texting and this two-way calling was developed. And then the evolution of the mobile phone turned into the creation of the smartphone and the smart device, which happened with the Apple iPhone. Right around 2010 is when this device was created and introduced to the world. And through that device, we were able to connect to the internet. We were able to take pictures. We were able to call and text people. But it really became like a mini computer or, laptop that we carried on us. And since then, we've continued to improve. The devices that are made today are, very impressive, and you can do essentially anything from most of the population, most of us started carrying these devices, okay, and having access to them in our pocket 24/7, okay? So it is no big surprise that around that time is when we started to see the mental health fallout from having these devices on us, 24/7. So instant connection in 2012 equaled increased mental health concerns. Okay, so this graph, I pulled it from the book called iGen. Dr. Jean Twenge wrote the book. I actually was able to exchange a few emails with her. And she sent this over, and it stops in 2017, but she said the data that she has it's just continued to increase since 2017. So what we're looking at is a graph. This is specific to teen girls and their rates of depressive symptoms and how it correlates with this instant connection that started around 2012. So if you see, the red line is depressive symptoms, okay? The blue line is internet hours used, and the green line is social media use, okay? And as you can see, right around 2012, depression rates were kind of, stable for a while here. And then in 2012, they just skyrocketed along with internet use and social media use. Okay. Again, just continuing to go up. The doctor that I spoke with said this number and this rate just continues to skyrocket. It is going up. There has no dips or drops. And so this is concerning because the rates keep going up, right? Talking about depression, anxiety, very concerning here as far as the mental health aspect and what happened around 2012. Okay, so our cell phones, smart devices, are essentially like a dopamine pump, okay? And that is the reason why people are addicted. And I'd like to show a video that does a very good job at explaining the science behind dopamine.
Is a lot like substance addiction in a lot of ways, but it's much newer. So substance addiction obviously involves the ingestion of a substance, and in the short term that feels good, and in the long term it harms your well-being in some respects. It can be physiological, it can be psychological, it can harm your social life, it can cause you to spend too much money, it can have a lot of negative effects on your life. Behavioral addiction is similar. The big difference though is that behavioral addiction does not involve the ingestion of a substance. And it's much newer. It's a much more recent phenomenon. So substance addiction has been around for a very long time, by some accounts for many thousands of years, but there weren't behaviors around that were compelling enough to rise to the level of addiction until quite recently. And the reason is that for them to be addictive, basically what has to happen is that there's a behavior that you enjoy doing in the short term, that you do compulsively, so you keep returning to it over and over again, but that in the long term harms your well-being. And it can, again, harm your well-being in lots of different respects. Social, financial, physical, psychological. And I think the reason why we've got these new forms of addiction, there are two main reasons. The first one is that technology is much more sophisticated and advanced than it was even 20 years ago. You're able to deliver the kinds of rewards that you need for a system to be addictive. So basically what people are looking for is unpredictability and the rapid feedback of either rewards, or if it's negative, then negative experiences. And you actually need that mix of positive and negative feedback. Just as, for example, when you post something online, sometimes you're going to get a lot of hits, sometimes you aren't. And it's that unpredictability that we find so compelling. You need to be able to deliver those rewards really rapidly. And for that, you need the internet with the right kind of bandwidth to be able to deliver those rewards. The other thing that I think has happened is that companies are much savvier about this. They're employing behavioral experts to tell them how to design their media, how to design the vehicles that deliver those media, smartphones, iPads, smartwatches, things like that. And for that reason, I think they are delivering products to us that are harder for us to resist. They've got enough features built in that we find to be pretty hard to resist, that we end up developing addictions to them. And by some counts, that applies to about half of the population of the developed world. It turns out that it's not the addiction to the device itself, it's that the device is just an incredibly effective way of delivering addictive content. So when you're addicted to a screen, it's not that the screen itself is something that you can't get enough of, it's what it's providing. I think one of the reasons why we're so addicted to screens or to the content they provide is that they go with us wherever we go, and that's relatively new. So if you played video games in the 80s or 90s or even the early 2000s, they didn't really go wherever you went as much as they do now, especially those games that were tied to the internet. Those were tied to your PC, you'd play where you were, and you didn't really leave with them as much. You had some portable devices, but those were much more primitive. Today, with iPhones, you can connect to other people on the go. You always have access to games, you always have access to email, you always have access to the internet, and you always have access to social media. And so they are great vehicles for providing the hits that you need when you need them. And basically, we tend to develop addictions when we have a psychological need. And we get those whenever we're bored, whenever we're feeling a little bit lonely, whenever we're not really sure what to do with ourselves next, whenever we don't feel particularly efficacious, like we're having an effect on the world that we'd like to be having, Those are the moments when you're looking for what some people call the adult pacifier. And smartphones tend to be a great adult pacifier because at those moments, you turn on your screen, you swipe, and you feel relaxed again. That's how people describe the experience. So they tend to be excellent devices for delivering these small hits that we look for. And social media is a great example. So social media obviously now travels with us. It used to be confined to home computers to a large extent. That's no longer the case. And people spend about 3 hours a day on average using their smartphones, which is pretty staggering. That's a huge chunk of the day, of the waking hours that we spend when we're not at work. And what that means is they're spending a lot of that time returning over and over again to check Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and so on. And they're checking for a number of things. One thing is that these media are bottomless, which means that you're constantly checking for new information. There's always something new to be kept up on. The other thing is if you happen to be a poster of content, you're very curious about getting rapid feedback as to whether people approve of that or they're not particularly interested in it. So a lot of the time what we do is we return over and over again compulsively to see whether we're getting the positive feedback that we seek when we post content. Because a lot of what we're doing when we post content is basically testing the social waters, getting a sense of whether people see the world the same way we do, which is very important to us as humans, and also getting a sense of whether they approve of us. And social approval is really important. But we're even willing to risk negative feedback because the worst thing that can happen to a human is to be ignored. It's actually far worse to be ostracized or ignored than it is to get negative feedback. And so when you put all of that together, the idea now that we have access to theoretically billions of people in the world at all times, wherever we are, makes smartphones addictive. We can always get that feedback that we desire.
So I thought that video was helpful, in kind of describing the immediate, as he described, like the adult pacifier, right? And that applies to kids as well. There's a notification, our phone lights up, something happens on our phone that dopamine is released. We're excited because something's happened, right? A notification. Someone's text me, something shared, and we train our brain without even realizing it. When all of those notifications are going off, we're constantly releasing that dopamine, which is that feel-good chemical. But then when maybe people aren't texting or aren't responding, then there's not that release of dopamine. So we don't feel so good about ourselves or our smart devices. So I like this idea of our smart devices as candy versus vegetables. Okay, this was in one of the books I read called Growing Up Shared by Stacy Steinberg. She used this idea of candy being, a harmful use, a harmful way of using our phones versus vegetables, a better use. Because as we already talked about, smart devices can be very handy, right? And useful in a lot of ways. So I'm definitely not promoting that we completely don't use our phones or don't let our kids use their phones, but making sure that they're using them in healthy ways is the best option. So referring to candy and using it in a harmful way, okay? Overuse that leads to lack of sleep. So Anthony mentioned the importance of sleep and brain development, and in a lot of the information I looked at in regards to cell phone use, it kept coming up over and over again that this lack of sleep is actually pretty important and pretty disruptive to our teens because they're already in such an important part of their development between their body growing, their brain developing. Those teen years are critical for good sleep. And when we overuse our devices, that can interrupt our sleep. Another harmful use, if we use our cell phones too much and indulge, we may have below average grades or attendance. Our kids might be participating in cyberbullying, and also, sexting or sending any inappropriate pictures or videos. Too much use and lack of sleep can cause mental health concerns like anxiety and depression. With this idea of harmful use, it's always instantly rewarding, but there's long-term negative effects. We aren't really building any skills. As the presenter mentioned in the video, it's like that pacifier, right? Like when we first use it and we swipe, we feel just instantly rewarded, right? Or when we get a notification and that dopamine is released within our body, we're excited, we're happy. But long-term, it's not great. And with cell phones, we constantly want more, just like candy, right? If someone sets a bowl of M&Ms in front of you, more than likely, you're not just going to take one and then be done with it. If you do, then you have great self-control, and that's awesome. But what is in candy is similar to our cell phone use, and that is sugar. And sugar is addictive. We know that once you introduce that sugar, that M&M into your system, it tastes really good. Sugar, we know alters the rush. So again, instantly rewarding, and you continue to want more and more, but you're never really satisfied. So comparing it to vegetables, right? And using our cell phones and our smart devices for really, for better uses, ways that are better for us, okay? So using these things in better ways, it creates better school outcomes, a home life. You can be mentally and emotionally stronger. Better uses of our cell phone is keeping in touch with friends and family. There are lots of helpful apps on our devices for self-care. There's meditation apps, there's different exercise apps. So using those apps to our advantage. We're also, if we're able to use our devices for better uses, we're developing actual skills and platforms that we can use, moving forward. And teaching our kids to use their smart devices for smart reasons. Okay, so rather than sitting and scrolling through Instagram and TikTok and whatnot, showing them how to use their device to look up those helpful self-care apps, maybe finding a game that you guys can play together as a family, using it to set reminders on the kids and alarms and whatnot. Also, listening to music is a great way to relax and kind of calm yourself. You might also learn how to do a hobby, hop on YouTube if you've been, curious on how to whittle, some wood. And I use that as an example because I talk about sleep. And to really, really, I can't even really stress enough the importance of sleep. Anthony already talked about it, but teenagers need at least 8 to 10 hours of uninterrupted sleep, okay? I think as much as like toddlers do. Their brains are going through such rapid brain development. And the other flip side of that is teenagers start to naturally produce melatonin later in the day or the night. So they're naturally, most teenagers, going to want to stay up later because that melatonin that helps them fall asleep, get sleepy, naturally doesn't start producing it later on in the day or at night. So we are, getting nice and relaxed before bedtime, they're already having a more difficult time falling asleep. When we sleep, the blue light, the phone noise, it interrupts our brains without us even realizing it. So we could be sound asleep and our phone goes off, whether it vibrates, we get a notification, the blue light comes on, that interrupts our brains. So while we think we're getting 8 to 10 hours, we're sleeping with our phone next to us, that quality time of sleep is actually less than what we think that we're getting. I thought this next part was really interesting. It takes an entire hour before bedtime for our brains to start shutting down and stop processing information. Okay, so it suggested that we turn off the TV, we put our phones away, put our devices away, for our brain to start shutting down and going to bed. So imagine that your youth, your teenager, has a breakup, right? And it's happening through texting because that is the most common way that our kids talk to each other. That might be really traumatic for them. And we've talked, Anthony and Bristol talked a little bit about trauma and what that looks like in kids' family life. Maybe some of the things that we happen, and it goes on and on. How likely do you think they are to fall asleep peacefully and have a good night rest? That isn't going to happen, right? Because our brain is just continuing to process what's happened. So when possible, turn off those devices an hour before bed. can be helpful. I think this conference is happening at a great time because school is slowly approaching for those that have school, whether in person or online. We know that it's happening here within the next 3-4 weeks. So it takes a solid 3 weeks to adjust sleep cycle. Okay. And I'm not suggesting that if your youth is up till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, which is what I'm hearing from the teens that I'm working with, that's their summer schedule. They stay up that late and then they sleep all day. I'm not suggesting that you start by having them go to bed, at 9, 10, 11 o'clock. It's, quite a big difference. I'm suggesting just starting off really slow. Even if you do go to bed an extra 5 to 10 minutes early, for the first few days and just kind of gradually work your way up. It will be so beneficial, not only to your youth, but also to your family, to your household, to start school off with your kids fully rested. And some kids, you guys have been back to school in an actual building in a year and a half. So this school year is really unique in that for some of us, it's their first time actually back into a school building. So really them set up with good sleep is very helpful when it comes to monitoring our cell phone use and social media use. Okay, so I saw this picture. It was actually a commercial a while ago, and I didn't find commercial, but I found a picture that comes from the commercial. And what happens is the commercial is the mom and the daughter are sitting together on the couch, and they're all hugging and cuddling, and they're looking at a book. And then the mom pulls out her cell phone to check something, and something comes up between the mom and daughter. Okay, and I think what Anita and Brooke mentioned about really listening and communicating with our loved ones is model of what our own behavior is. And if we want our kids to listen to us, we need to make sure that we're modeling good behavior for them as well. And I've had some parents say, I'm using my phone, for work. Okay. Most jobs can be, if you're working from home, they can happen from your cell phone. So if there is a time that you need to use your phone for work, it'd be helpful to explain to your child that you're doing something for work. You can even include them in, right, for a good reason, like maybe grocery shopping. Some people are using different services for their grocery shops, whether you get it delivered or you go pick it up. Include your youth in your grocery shopping list and helping them put the cart together. Okay. When they see us, kind of just scrolling away, they think that that's okay to do. So modeling is really important. So we're going to talk a little bit about cell phone self-care for yourself and your kids. Okay. So the actual physical self-care of your phone and your devices. Okay. So physically putting your phone away or turning it off. Setting screen limits for your phone, for your kid's phone. Checking in with your cell phone carrier to see what parenting safety protocols they offer. A lot of different carriers, they're able to set curfews on the phone that they can just be shut off at 10 o'clock. As far as not being able to connect to the Wi-Fi, they could still text or call if needed, obviously, if there's an emergency. They might be able to set how much data is used. So that requires a little bit of work on our part, right, as parenting does, but checking in with your cell phone carrier. Take some time with your youth to clean up their accounts. Unsubscribe, unfriend, unfollow things or people if it's consuming too much of their day. I recently had a kid tell me, a high schooler, that he subscribes to 1,700 channels and people on YouTube, and he has his notifications set up for all 1,700 subscriptions. And that all day long, all he gets is notifications from YouTube. And mind you, that's just YouTube. He's also using Instagram, TikTok. He's texting, he's FaceTiming people. He is literally on his phone, he said, about 20 hours a day. And also is wondering why he can't sleep at all during the day. So we had a nice, healthy conversation about that. If you want to follow people, turn off the notifications so that isn't coming to your phone. Another physical self-care is if you want to stay connected to your youth, you could select an interactive game to play with your kids. Some self-care as far as your emotional and your mental well-being, journaling, letter writing, listening to the radio, getting good sleep, going for a walk. Movement, you guys, is so critical for not only us as parents, but also for our kids. There are studies that show when we exercise and we increase our heart rate for at least 10 minutes, our body will release that dopamine, that feel-good chemical, but it stays within our body for up to 12 hours. Okay, so, you know, going for a walk, a bike ride, exercising, something to get that heart elevated. You can look for opportunities to volunteer or for a job, going to visit a friend or a family member, and also creating new rules and guidelines for use within your household. Okay, and I would encourage you to include your youth in creating those new rules and guidelines. Oftentimes, if we come to our kids and we say, okay, no more cell phone use, okay, when they've just got done using it, we know they're using it for 20 hours a day. And now you're suddenly going to say, you can't use it at all. Naturally, that is going to cause a lot of friction. It's going to cause some crazy outbursts, some very upset feelings. So sitting down with your youth and coming up with healthy rules for your household, keeping in mind you are the parent and guardian, so you have the upper hand in setting these rules. But if you include your youth, I guarantee that you're going to get more buy-in from them. Okay, and it could be small, like, we're going to start by not going to bed with your cell phone and having a charging station in the kitchen, and everyone's cell phone gets put there at night. And then they're going to say, well, I use my cell phone as an alarm clock, because I've heard that out of a lot of kids. Okay, well, invest in a $5 to $10 alarm clock that they can keep in their room, teach them a life skill on how to use an alarm clock, and you've solved that issue. Okay. Another rule could be no cell phones during, breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Like Anita had pointed out, the importance of eating meals together, uninterrupted. And you could start this off again slowly, just like we talked about the sleep schedule. You start off a little bit at a time. I would encourage you to do that with the phones as well. Okay, so I have some resources here for your family. And this information will be mailed out after today, so you'll have it handy to click on and to look at. But Common Sense Media, Connect Safely, Internet Safety 101. There's also a really helpful movie documentary called Childhood 2.0. And I would like to take a minute to watch the trailer for that movie. The entire movie, it can be seen on YouTube. It's about an hour and a half long. It's meant for parents and guardians to watch, not for young kids. You can use your discretion on whether or not you think teenagers should watch it, but it's definitely geared more towards parents and guardians. So just give me a second to pull it up here. I'm going to get this here.
A long time ago, families were in communities. They were local, they were small.
I was born in the very depths of the Great Depression. I was put to work carrying wood, carrying water. I knew how to shell peas. I knew how to break beans. We still didn't have electricity.
I have 2 Instagram accounts.
I use Instagram, Snapchat,
and TikTok.
TikTok and Fortnite.
I can just scroll for hours on end.
11 hours a day.
It's been 8, 9.
Maybe like 12.
It's actually been a way that we can keep track of them out there in the real world where things really are scary.
The lives of kids were sort of changing slowly for a while. And then all of a sudden, most kids were able to get on social media, and that's when everything skyrocketed.
The rates at which they're experiencing problems continues to increase.
We also know that the teen suicide rate increased 56%.
Last year alone, we received over 18 million reports of international and domestic online child sexual abuse.
We have traded a false sense of safety and security for actually putting our kids in riskier situations.
I call it the race to the bottom of the brainstem. So it starts with techniques like pull to refresh.
Pretty much every guy has like an addiction to it, but no one talks about it.
But it's just faster now, and it's younger.
Well, yeah, like nudes of girls go around to school all the time.
At the beginning of the year, there were multiple suicides before school even started.
There were men that wanted to talk to children at all hours of the day and night.
Be shot.
On Snapchat, one thought it'd be a funny idea to talk the other one into committing suicide, and she did it. She's dead.
After about 6 weeks, we were able to crack his phone.
Kids right now are going to experience the worst of what we're going through.
I'm a little nervous.
The first time.
Do you think your parents know that this happens?
No.
My kid won't do that. My kid would never. My kid's school isn't like that. You're wrong.
Because what they see, they feel neurologically compelled to do.
Right now, we're effectively living in an experiment. How is this going to affect us? We'll find out.
So I have, as I mentioned, since 2004, and have kind of witnessed the change and the evolution of cell phones being in advance. And the 2.0 video is one of the best resources that I've seen over the years. And it's very current. It was just released last year, so the data and information there is very recent. And I would encourage you to take a look at it. Watching it is going to be difficult, maybe, because some of the content is very disturbing as far as what our kids are witnessing, what they're having access to. And I would say the easier part is watch the video. What happens after that is the difficult part in deciding, as a parent or guardian, what you're going to do with the information. Okay, so we are now going to realize what our kids are up against, and then how we can help our youth filter through some of that information. So really setting those rules and guidelines for our household is going to be handy to do after you view the movie. You see it on YouTube. It's called Childhood 2.0, and I highly suggest it. And the other reason why I like Childhood 2.0 is that our cell phone smart devices, they don't come with any instructions, right, on how to teach our kids to use these devices in a healthy way. And there's a reason for that. Cell phone companies and these different apps and advertisings, they're making money off of us using our devices. They don't want to limit what we do. They want us to do more. The internet, social media, it's bottomless. You can literally spend all day long scrolling, looking at whatever you want, which again, if you're using it for healthy reasons, for using it as vegetable reasons, it's wonderful. If you're using it for candy and that overuse, that is really when we can get in trouble with our mental health, with our sleep. So I'm going to share my last page, which is my resources. Again, I just want to put that back there. And let's see, I think I'm on the last page. Yep, so my information is there. I also wanted to share a couple of books. I'm consciously aware how I was spending my time. And so I found some books that were very helpful, and I wanted to just share them with them. This is the author that I was able to exchange some emails with. It's a good read, you guys, I'm not going to lie. There's lots of great information in this book. The other book is called Growing Up Shared. This was very insightful in how parents are using our social media in sharing information to our kids. And at what point do we kind of cross this line of sharing private information that our youth might not want shared about them, right? As far as when our toddlers become potty trained. So they get older and that Facebook memory pops up of them, this was the day, that might be very embarrassing to our kids. Another book that I really enjoyed, called What They Don't Teach Teens. This is the life safety skills for teens and for adults who care. So there's a lot of different topics in here about different life skills and kind of like the rules of society. And I found it really insightful. They had a chapter of social media use, which some of the information in the presentation came from this book as well. So I'm at the end of my presentation. I would like to open it up for any questions. Or comments. I know Maria, you have the parent with us. If you want to unmute and show your video, you can. I know you were asking a specific question about how to get your kids to listen to you when they've got their cell phone in their hand. So Maria, if you are there, or you can stop in the question box if you want to. If you still have that question. All right, so Anita, I am done with my presentation here. And so if there aren't any questions or any comments, I'd like to go ahead and hand it off to Samantha for her presentation on self-care.
I have one question. How often do you, since teenagers feel that they own their private connection, they're private, actually parents will. So one of the questions was, how often or how do I go about checking the social media on our own?
So this is, an interesting, delicate question because cell phones and being able to use them is a privilege for our kids to be able to have these devices. It's not a right. They don't turn, 12, 13 and they think they automatically own a device, right? But they don't. So from an early age, trying to teach our kids that these devices are privileges. And with anything in life, if we're using that thing correctly, we're making good choices, then we can continue to use them. So it's a delicate question to set up, between the parent and youth. Technically, as a parent, one may feel that they have the right to check their kid's phone at any point in time. And so that might be the case that if you need to do that. I think it could get a little bit tricky if we're checking the phone with our kids knowing it. I think there might be a safer and more gentle way to do that if we include our youth in that process. And that could be a rule or a guideline. The day that we introduce this device to our youth, letting them know that we'll be checking it on a regular basis, whether that's with you or without you knowing. I am, paying the bill, and but not only that, but wanting that youth to be as safe as possible. And because of the bill, they may not even realize when they're in unsafe situations or when things may be happening to them. So I think it's a conversation that needs to happen early on. If you're in the thick of it, you've got a 16-year-old who's had a cell phone for the last 5 years, and there's utter chaos happening in your house. I would encourage you to, try to have a conversation with your youth. Like Anita and Brooke talked about, that communication is key. And also realizing that if your youth has been using a device for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that dopamine, that physical chemical reaction that's been happening for so long isn't just going to stop if you take that device away, right? We have trained them. So now we need to untrain them, which requires a lot of work on our end. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to Brooke now. She's going to be talking about normalizing self-care and the importance of it.
Hi, okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so normalizing self-care. My name is Samantha, and I am a prevention specialist at the Guidance Center. And today we will be talking about normalizing self-care. What are some challenges parents might face to self-care, the stress response, and then self-care practices and tools that could be used. So when you're a parent, self-care can often slip to the bottom of lists of things to do, but taking care of yourself is essential. Self-care is being aware and acting over one's overall health and wellness. Self-care is a tool that can be used to manage stress and life challenges. Self-care is a balance of personal, social, and work lives. Self-care can be anything in order to take care of oneself. So the importance of self-care. So now that we know what self-care is, we need to discuss the importance of self-care. Self-care has become a popular phrase in our culture, but what does it mean? We often think of self-care as a to-do list of behaviors that will help us relax during high stress times in our life. And while that could be true for some people, self-care is a daily action that helps us show up in our everyday life. Self-care can be preventative or it can be in the moment. Self-care creates more time, energy, and space to be present and available in our everyday lives. Some things that self-care can help protect against is burnout, compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress. Self-care is particularly important for parents and caregivers to better support their children or others in their care. So I like to think of self-care as like the oxygen you when you're on an airplane, when the flight attendants say, okay, put on your oxygen mask first so you can help others around. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you're asking someone who isn't able to take care of themselves to take care of someone else. So some challenges to self-care. Many parents aren't aware of all that they do for their children and families. So oftentimes they don't think about their own needs. If finding time to fill up your own cup were easy, we would all do it. There are some common and powerful barriers that prevent parents from investing in their own well-being. Some common barriers include lack of time. Parents are already stressed, having realistic boundaries, and and life challenges. Lack of time could be a major barrier to parents. However, making time when it feels like there is no time for self-care is important. Just like kids, parents need a break too. Unrealistic expectations can prevent parents from practicing self-care. The thought of how something is supposed to look can make it easy for parents to quit things if they do not turn out as planned, and things often do not turn out as planned. In addition, parents are conditioned to believe that there is either good and right or wrong and bad. But when it comes to self-care, there's no right way to refuel yourself. Another challenge parents are faced with in life are life challenges and transitions. With that being said, change is hard. So next, we're going to just talk about the stress response. So a lot of the other presenters talk about stress and like how the stress is so involved in our everyday life. But so our stress is just our system's way of responding to any kind of demand. It can be positive or negative. So like a positive stress could be that like, maybe you might have like a promotion on the line. So like it could be a very positive stress, but it could also cause a lot of stress in your life, right? Or you could have the negative stress. And then what happens is our body reacts by releasing chemicals that gives us the energy and strength to help like process and cope with those like stressors that we're receive. And then a lot of times we think of a physical danger, but responses can occur from any type of stress. Okay, so this is just the side effects of stress. Parental stress impacts individuals and family relationships. There are physical and emotional characteristics associated with stress. Stress can affect the body physically, and parents can become fatigued and have increased headaches, skin irritations, maybe cause other like types of infections, tight muscles, muscle twitches. Parents in their mind can start to worry, maybe make some impaired judgments, like if I remember a college professor once said that a lot of times parents are taking time bombs for children and they don't know when their parents is going to lash out, because they might do the same thing every day, and sometimes a parent might just lash out, and it's not so much that the parent was mad that the kid was playing Legos or doing whatever the activity was that the parent like lashed out on. It was because the parent was stressed, so they weren't able to handle that conversation with the kid like they would have in another time. So parents' behaviors might start drinking more. They might not have like lack of appetite. They might stop having inconsistent sleep, which could cause more issues. And then the emotions of stress would be like depression, loss of confidence. They're just overall like appearance and feeling just isn't the same anymore. So next we're going to talk about some benefits of self-care. Self-care is one of the most important prevention tools that we have. Benefits of practicing self-care include being your best self in all areas of life. Like again, like that, being able to feel yourself so you're able to feel others is really important. You're able to maximize your potential, giving yourself that fresh mindset. You're able to look at that same situation in a different way. You also, by participating in self-care, improve your quality of life, and then enhancing physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Using self-care as a tool to deal with life and work stressors are really important. So some strategies parents can use, and this is just a couple. There's a lot. I know Allison mentioned, the vegetable version of like technology. You're able to use like a calming app, but like just making sure you get enough sleep, exercise, going for a walk. It doesn't have to be like going to a gym and like doing 500 burpees. If that's not your scene, that's going to cause more stress. That's not going to be your self-care. Just eating healthy or well, relaxation, just like taking that time and like sitting down and like debriefing about your day, especially if it was a stressful day. Connection, like being able to reconnect with your like children, like, hey, ask your youth, do you want to go for a walk with me? That's not only providing your self-care, but it's giving you the opportunity to do something together with your youth. And then it's also allowing that space and time for you to have those conversations that you might find hard to have without having time to connect. And then it's okay to have alone time. I know a lot of parents are like, I can't participate in self-care because I'm not allowed to like do whatever. If you need like that 20 minutes to go outside and garden, do it. Do whatever you need for your own self-care. So now I just would like to, since we're talking about self-care, is watch a little mindfulness exercise. So let me grab that really fast. Alrighty. Okay, so I guess you guys aren't able to hear this video. Let me see if I can troubleshoot really fast.
You might have to reshare your screen and hit share sound.
And then is the volume up on the YouTube video itself as well?
It's
Yes.
Better?
Mm-mm.
Can you hear it?
No, if you wanted to email the video, I can try sharing it.
I can put it in the link. It's a 10-minute video. And it's just like it makes you pay attention to like taking a deep breath and were you gonna say something, Allison?
Yeah, I have it pulled up on my computer. Do you want me to try sharing it?
Yeah, if it works.
Okay.
If not, I can.
Welcome to the Daily Calm. Let's start today's session by finding a comfortable position with a tall, straight back. Allow your arms to rest gently. And when you're ready, close your eyes. Bring full attention to this very moment, settling in and allowing the mind and body to still. And with openness, patience, and curiosity, bring your awareness to the breath. Taking a deep breath in and releasing it fully. Follow the breath as it flows in and out of your body. And taking one last deep breath before letting the breath settle. Allowing it to feel natural and easy. Don't try to force the breath or regulate it in any way. Just allow it to flow naturally on its own.
Okay, so I had her end it a little earlier than the whole video, but like watching a video like that, it's 10 minutes. You could do it like right before you go to bed or right in the morning. It's just, you know, a tool that we can use, and as Allison referred to it, as a vegetable for technology. So with that being said, does anyone have any questions regarding self-care and how we have to normalize it? Okay, then I'm going to turn it over to Anita.
Thank you, Samantha. Really appreciate it. It almost put me to sleep. I was getting very relaxed there. I would like to share my screen with you and in the conclusion of our workshop, and would all of our presenters put their video on so that we can thank everyone.